Hey everybody, we're early today. I'm coming on live early. I was gonna come on live a little bit later on. I had told you guys that yesterday that I was gonna do the live a little later, but it is a school day, and I do realize that I'm like 3 hours ahead on East Coast. So I'm like, I should just, come on because, here we are. We're here together. Um Welcome to those of you who are watching this post the live broadcast. Thank you so much for joining. I know a lot of you do actually join after the live has ended, so I appreciate y'all. Welcome, come in to those of you guys who are coming in to the room. I told you guys I was going to be on a little later today, but I'm actually on earlier because I realized that a lot of y'all are on the East Coast or you are Central. So for me, I'm on the coast, on the West Coast, so it's a little easier for me to be a little bit more flexible. But just to kind of start off, yesterday we had a lively discussion about it was a live that we had a lively discussion about Sean Combs' case, aftermath of it all. Chef Jordan was at the center of our discussion, as well as Clayton Howard and some of the things that he's been bringing up this past week. It was a great discussion. You guys are amazing and have a lot of great points. We don't always agree, and that's okay as long as we are willing to hear each other out. So I really appreciate that. I wanted to do another live about this because even though it's just like paining me to talk about Sean Combs ad nauseum, it's just, I do understand that a lot of us are having trouble with this verdict. Whether it's because we're think it's unfair or we think it's fair, like the outcome is fair, and we just think it's wrong that he was tried in the first place. A lot of us want to talk about it. So I'm here. I'm going to sit on here about an hour or so if you guys want to come in and talk. But I do have some things to share. And then the class can start when folks start coming in, saying things, asking questions. Type your questions into the chat. Here on Cast and Court TV, we are mostly about the law. I do cover some pop culture things if it intersects with legalities, for sure. But really what we're about is the law. And also as it relates to the process of the law. And if it's certain things, the legalese language that lay people may not understand, or the legalese process that lay people may not understand. I spent many years in the district attorney's office, many years working on death penalty cases, cases of high stakes, murder one cases, murder for hire cases. And so I have been down this road, been in those rooms where we're charging people. What's the elements of the charge? All that stuff. I've been in those rooms. I understand what it is. I am not an attorney. I want to be clear. I am not an attorney. But what I am is I was a public information officer. And a lot of times a public information officer are attorneys because public information officers disseminate the information to the press, to the public, to constituents based upon what the attorneys are doing in the courtroom. So though I am not an attorney, I understand a great deal of the legal process, a great deal of legal language, and all of that. So I just want to say that before we get going, so you guys know where I'm at. So yesterday we ended on the note actually talking about Janice Combs. And we're going to start today talking about her because Daily Mail has released a story. And in their story today that actually posted about 5 hours ago, they say that Janice is not celebrating because, according to the Daily Mail, she's not celebrating because she says it's not over. This is not over for her. She says Janice Combs, who's been in the courtroom since day one with her son, she says it's not over for her because of these two lesser counts. She says, do I seem calm? Of course I do. Does anyone want to see me faint or collapse? No, they don't. And I don't want to see it myself. So I hold it together. She said it hasn't been easy and it's not over yet. We're not making any plans for a celebration because it's too soon. Now, Mama Combs is the only one making sense here. Even out of the legal team, which I'm going to hop on them in a minute. Because I keep saying that he still has a felony. He has two felonies. So it's not like a necessarily a cause for celebration. Should people be happy who are pro Diddy? Should they be happy that he was not convicted of the larger crimes, the RICO and the SEX trafficking? Absolutely. I'm not saying that's, not celebratory. But to the length and to the degree that some people are taking it, they might want to chill out, because this judge can come in here and say whatever he wants to say. These are maximum 10 years. And I've said this before, and it bears repeating, that the judge, it's at his leisure. He can sentence Sean Combs to whatever he wants within the legal range. And the legal range says, well, the max is 10 years. And if he feels a certain way, based upon a lot of things, the pre-sentencing interviews that he has to do with the Department of Probation, based upon some of the complaints and the letters that the judge is receiving from people who have worked for Combs, or who have been threatened by Combs, or who have been assaulted by Combs, complaining that he should not be let out, the judge could say, well, I'm going to sentence you to 10 years, and I'm going to sentence you to 10 years consecutively. So you need to do 10 years on that count, and then the clock starts over, and then you need to do another 10 years. Now, is that unlikely? Absolutely, it is unlikely. It's unlikely that that will happen. It's more unlikely. What's more likely going to happen, though I cannot guess because I'm not Judge Sub Romanian and I have no idea, but what's more likely to happen based upon what the prosecution is seeking, which is up to 5 years, and based upon what the statute says is likely to happen, is looking at anywhere between 5 and 8 years. Really, that's what it looks like. And so Mama Combs is saying, I'm not celebrating until I know what that sentence is. And that to me makes sense. It makes sense. I think that initially the Combs kids were really excited, which I get, because their dad has been under fire for the past, year about this thing. So I get them being excited like that. But Mama Combs has been around a long time. She's 80 years old. So she knows what's up, and she knows the potentiality of what her son is facing. So she's being very cautious as to how she's celebrating, and as to how she is looking at things. Now, they did this story directly after the verdict was brought through. They actually interviewed her, or talked to her rather, right after the verdict was brought through. And it turns out she was right, because he was denied bail. This was before the denial of bail. So I think, Mama Combs had some good instincts on the fact that not out of the woods yet, right? So, and even though this story is just coming out today, there's some other things she said in here I want to read to you guys as well. She says, though her son has described her as ailing, like being sick, she looked polished and in control during her very long day on Wednesday, the Wednesday that the verdict came through. And she says she doesn't pay attention to the noise and just focuses on her son and her faith. That she puts her faith in God. He's the only one. The rest of it is just noise and doesn't have anything to do with her. Which I thought was really interesting, because up until now, I've never even known Mama Combs to be spiritual in any kind of way. You know what I mean? For the longest time, I was like, John Combs' mom looked like she's trying to be Lil' Kim. Like, I just never even struck her. She never struck me as like a church lady, as if any kind. So this is very interesting. But this is normal, because people, when they get into some sort of a kerfuffle with the law, especially, they often turn to God, and there's nothing wrong with that. But anyway, that was the Mama Combs of it all. Please drop your opinions and your comments in the chat. But on to the prosecution. Where did they go wrong? Now, you guys know my stance on this personally, that I feel that there was enough evidence and all of that. But there's some real, I think, things to be said about the idea of the prosecution going wrong in some areas. Now, I've already talked about yesterday how they did not actually charge him on counts that they probably could have charged him on, but didn't. And part of the reason they didn't, my guesstimation again, is because when the grand jury indictment came through, the grand jury probably said they didn't have enough evidence to actually indict on, for instance, the gun charges, right? Or the baby oil GHB charges. Now, over the course of the last few days, I'm sure some of you have been hearing about this juror interview that CNN exclusively got with the alternate juror, George, who has taken it upon himself to sort of be the spokesperson for the jurors, because I don't think they've talked to any other jurors. I could be wrong. Correct me, guys, if they have. But I think that George is the only one that they've talked to. And when he talked to Laura Coates at CNN the other day, he said some very interesting things. One of the things he said was that the freak off video tape, whatever, did not really seem like Cassie didn't seem like she didn't want to be there. Now, I was wondering, how is she supposed to seem like she doesn't want to be there? First of all, the accusation is not RAPE. The accusation is coercion. Is there a way for someone, is there a facial expression for someone to give if they're being coerced, especially if the person that's coercing them or extorting them in the situation, so was the situation with Cassie, has basically said, you need to look like you're in the role. Like, don't be looking like you're not in the role. You need to look like you're in the role. You know what I'm saying? I didn't buy that when he said that, because I'm like, well, the freak off video was shown to you guys so you could actually see a freak off video, like everything. So this could sort of corroborate or confirm what Cassie was telling you and what the escorts were telling you was happening in that room. It wasn't necessarily a window for you guys to be like, well, let me look at her eyes and see if she's enjoying it or not. Because by and large, she was acting. She was acting. She also says as much in the testimony that she gave. She said she was acting. She said, that she needed to look a certain way or look the part because Combs was, he would get angry. So if you are somebody who is getting tossed around like a rag doll, like we saw in that Intercontinental video, and the man is telling you, you need to look like you're in this moment, you're probably going to look like you're in the moment. So that was weird that he said that was a weird point. Then he goes on to talk about how he didn't think Don Richard was a good witness. Now, I agree. Wholeheartedly, hands down, agree that Don Richard was a waste of time. Now, from the beginning, I was against Don Richards getting up there. I'm going to tell y'all why. Don Richards should have left herself on somewhere and took a vacation and let it alone, because she, much like Jane Doe, who I'll get on in a minute, she, much like Daphne Joy, was playing two against the middle. Okay. Don Richard was trying to hold out to see how much money she could get from the Diddy situation. This is no secret. This is no secret. And this is actually the reason why the prosecution didn't put on a lot of the other witnesses who had like been paid off or whatever, because they didn't want the defense to be able to utilize the argument of, oh, well, you just up here because you're trying to get a payday. Now, Don Richard was as translucent as saran wrap as it relates to the fact that she really was just up there so she don't get fined, in the words of Marshawn Lynch, because she added nothing. She added nothing to the case whatsoever. She couldn't even really expound on like how her experience in seeing Cassie getting beaten up and all of that. When the defense went up there to talk to her, to cross-examine, I mean, they worked her over, because a lot of her testimony was very much sort of like on the edge. Well, he kind of kept me from doing things, but I kept like contacting him to work with him because, like I really wanted to work, like it just, yeah, exactly. Back in Black. Kim, I think that's your name. Yeah. Kim, yeah, girl, she got mollywopped. She got mollywopped on the stand because really what the defense brought out was that she was the one that was like reaching out to him, trying to work with him. And then she kept claiming that he was, abusive towards her. He never assaulted Don. He never sexually assaulted her. She really was supposed to be there to just say that she was an eyewitness to the Cassie beatings, which she was. She never called the police or anything like that. I mean, I get that she was scared or whatever, but she had limited scope, in my opinion, of even the Cassie beatings, and she had definitely had limited scope as it related to like, you know, how he treated her or mistreated her. So I think she held back, and the reason why I think Don Richard held back is because she is waiting on a payday from Sean Combs. She still, and the only reason she got up there was because she hadn't received her payday. That is the reason the prosecution did not force Gina to get up there. If the government wanted to find Gina, they could have found her. I mean, y'all know that. It's the government. They want, if the feds want to find you, they will find you. But she, of course, like I mentioned the other day, was paid off by Combs or in some way, somehow Romeoed by Combs to stay quiet and stay off the stand. So you don't force someone like that to get on the stand because they can torpedo your case. Well, I kind of think Don was there with it. And this is what the juror is saying. The juror that spoke to CNN, the alternate, he said, I understand why the jury came up with the verdict they did. He said, I probably would have as well. And part of because, and he sort of rattles off some reasons. And mainly, one of them is the Don testimony. He said it was weak. He said it was weak. He also said that Cassie was believable, but some of it didn't add up. He said it was believable. Her testimony was believable. We believed it, like, what she said and everything. But it was probably some of those text messages where she was saying that she loved him. And, he felt like the defense did a really great job of sort of bringing out that sort of contrast messaging, text messages that they brought out that basically, she was a willing participant, or she loved this guy, or she was there because she wanted to get something out of him. He also said that he felt like at some point during the trial that it seemed like, and I want to say exactly what he said, but he said something like it seemed like they were out to get him, is what he said. He said that some of the evidence that the government brought up, it seemed like they were out to get Diddy, and that it just seemed like very forced, is what he said. Okay, let's see. Okay, here it is. Here he says, reading all my notes and looking back at the evidence, I probably would have reached the same conclusion as the other jurors. He goes on to say, I think there was always a little bit of doubt in people's mind. I think it was a tough case to prove, especially the first charge, the RICO. There was always a little doubt there, even from the beginning. And then this is what he says. He says that Don Richards was not very credible, and that he even wrote in his notebook as to her testimony that this seemed like a takedown. And when she got off the stand, because I was following along on the transcripts as it was happening, and when she got off the stand, I said, what was she there for? I was just like, she could torpedo this whole case. She was very early. She was one of, like, I think the second day, the first week for sure, but like the second day or something like that. But I'm like, oh my gosh, like hopefully Cassie can make up some groundwork, because Don has like potentially torpedoed this entire case. And here he's confirming it. She was a terrible witness. I think that Dawn was even more terrible than Daphne Joy, even though Dawn wasn't on the stand as long. But it was just the fact that she said a whole lot of nothing. She said a lot of contradictory things, especially as it relates to the fact that, like, she was so afraid of him and he would make comments about her body and he would do all this stuff. And yeah, but this doesn't, like, really prove, and I'm talking to the prosecution now, guys, this doesn't really prove that this guy is like, you know, a sex trafficker. This just basically says that he's a butthead. You know what I mean? I think we all can agree he's not a good person. You know what I'm saying? But or a good boss. But this doesn't really prove anything. Then she goes into some of the things about, like, she witnessed Cassie getting beat up, and she, says that she just didn't feel like she could go to anyone about it. And we've heard other people say that as well. But again, Dawn is holding out for a payday, and she didn't say or reveal as much as she could have. I felt like she was just there so that the government or anyone couldn't hold her into contempt. And I don't think she really wanted to be there, quite frankly. I think she wanted to just hold out for the money that she has, because she has a civil suit against him. And I think, she just was like, no, you know. So the Dawn testimony is just really, it was pretty raggedy. It really was. And then he says that he was impressed by the defense's work in court and noted Combs was very attentive in the courtroom and that he was fighting for himself. And then he goes on to say that he was not convinced by the prosecution's assertions that Cassie and Jane Doe were trafficked. He wasn't convinced of that. Now, my opinion is that Daphne Joy, aka Jane Doe, torpedoed the sex trafficking case. That's what I think. Because she really, if I went back into my notes to see, like, how, what she was saying in chronological order, and she really comes off like a gold digger. Really. She's very opportunistic. She meets him while she's, like, vacationing with a friend who's already dating him or whatever. And then she starts dating him while the friend, she gives him his number, give him her number, excuse me, while she's on the vacation with the friend. And then after that, she, the friend gets married to some other guy. And so then she takes her spot, so to speak. And then I was watching today the interview. You guys should watch it too. It's on Vlad TV. The interview that Vlad TV did with Don, which is the escort that Daphne Joy utilized. He's a very good looking brother. I mean, he's very good looking. But he's the guy that is the first freak off escort. And she says in the testimony that, and Don says it too, that Sean Combs brings Don over to the house and he sort of, like, talks to her about the lifestyle that they're in. And Don says that she was very into it, that she was very into it. She was saying how she was, like, asking a lot of questions. They were talking about their kids collectively. Like, the conversation was very jovial, he said. She said that she was curious about everything. And then that they get into it, like, when they actually start, doing this, freak off, that she's very into it. And I remember on the stand that she even commented that the interaction with Dawn was nice. Oh, it was nice. I was with Dawn. It was nice. She also says that about her interaction or her freak off experience with Paul. She says, "Oh, being with Paul was nice." I kind of think she had a crush on Paul. I think that if Paul had a little bit more cash, and he was like, rolling in the dough, because Daphne Joy, you gotta have cash to be with her. Okay, she made that plain and clear throughout the whole trial. Okay, but if Paul had a little bit of cash, Daphne Joy would have been over there. She'd have been doo doo doo. She'd have been another one, because Paul was also a trainer. Like Cassie's husband was Diddy's trainer. Paul was also a trainer that actually turned from Diddy's trainer to an escort. And so I think that Daphne was really into these guys, like for real. Okay. And in the interview that Dawn does with Vlad TV, he confirms that she was into it, asking him a lot of questions that, So my point in bringing that up is I just feel like Daphne Joy torpedoed the trafficking case, because yes, the jury could have believed Cassie, which the alternate says that he believed Cassie. But when you bring that, you couple that with Daphne's testimony, you torpedo the whole thing, because even though they believed Cassie, there was still trepidation as it related to Cassie. Well, why did she keep doing this? Or why did she come back after, she was at her parents' house? Or why did she, all the questions. And so then when you couple that with Daphne Joy talking about how much she, was into Paul, and how she was into Don, and then she was into this one and that one and the third, then it's just an odd sort of thing. I also felt during the trial that Daphne was an escort herself. I mean, I don't know if that's true, but I kind of like the way that she was answering the questions. She too was holding back. She didn't give it all also. So she's obviously, still trying to get her house paid, because Sean is paying for her house and her lawyers, which he did to keep her from giving the feds any real information. But I think that I kind of felt like she kind of gave me escort vibes. Like I know that she has a kid with 50 and everything, but like, isn't this your thing that you do? Especially because she winds up going to Vegas with Kanye and his wife. And then she knows the people that are having the live sex that the whole group is looking at. She takes her top off. She's, I don't want to do that too much. I'm a little heavy up here, but that's what she was doing in the party. She's flashing herself at the party and everything. So it's like, I mean, are you an escort? Because that's the kind of vibe I got from it. And I think that's probably the vibe that the jury got. The jury probably got the vibe that she may have been an escort, that maybe was just trying to get more out of him than, he was willing to give up, or was trying to flip her status. Like, yeah, I'm going to come in and escort. I mean, let's be real about it, y'all. Can we talk? Melania Trump was an escort at one time. She's now the first lady of the United States. So the reality is that you have women who escort, who do this kind of work, okay, who end up getting with the right one and flip their status. And that's how I viewed her. I viewed her as that she's too opportunistic. She doesn't move like a normal woman does. Because I can tell you right now, if a man propositions me talking about, and she's 38 years old, like she's in our age group here. I don't know about how old you guys are, but I'm in my 40s. So she's a grown woman. She was 38 when this started. So she's about 40, 41. Me and her right in there together. And if a man right now propositioned me with the kind of behavior that she was doing with Sean Combs, I would tell him in a lot of curse words with a lot of explicitives to go somewhere and sit down. Okay? But if you are in that world and that's what you're used to, and that's kind of like how you roll, then yeah, it's no sweat. You know what I'm saying? Like the way that Dawn said that I'm talking about Dawn, the escort now, Don, not Don Richard, but Don. The way that Dawn, the escort, said that Daphne Joy was acting as they were talking about the freak off and about the lifestyle and everything. He said that she was just so into it that he was just like, kind of just surprised or just like taken aback a little bit that she was just like so into it, and that it was kind of like a normal conversation because also they were talking about their private lives as well. And I'm like, that is very interesting. Now, when she got on the stand, she talked about the freak offs, how she would have to perform, and she would have to perform for 13 hours in these heels, and she would have sores in her private areas because of the friction, and then she had several UTIs. I mean, if it's me, which it wouldn't be, but let's just say if it's me, the first UTI I get, I'm out. You know what I'm saying? Or sore or whatever is happening, I'm out of here. Anything that's causing me physical pain, it's not the activity for me. Okay. But she kept doing it because really her goal was the money. Daphne Joy, and this is what the jury heard, and this is why we didn't get trafficking, because what the jury heard from Daphne Joy was, I wasn't getting the publicity that Young Miami was getting. Now, she was very jealous of Young Miami. She didn't say her name during the trial, but if you were reading along in the transcripts and reading between the lines, you knew exactly who she was talking about. She made enough innuendo, she made enough, specific little details to say or to make notice that this was Young Miami she was talking about. She was very jealous of Young Miami. She even talked about the time that Combs bought Young Miami I don't think it was a Mavic, but it was some kind of car that he bought her, but it was a very expensive car. And, of course, she had her show, Carisha and everything, but she talks about that car. And she got so mad because Young Miami put it on her Instagram. And then he ends up buying her some jewelry. And what's interesting is that I will tell you, Sean Combs is cheap, but most rich people are cheap anyway because they don't want to spend their money. Because the jewelry that he bought her was a set, and he broke the set up between her and Gina. I think she got the necklace and Gina got the bracelet. I think that the little clover jewelry that's really popular right now. I can't think of the name, but y'all type it in the chat if y'all know it and can tell me what it is. But anyway, he broke the setup, and so he didn't buy her card, but he bought her some jewelry. So Daphne Joy only complained when she saw the other women were getting things that she wasn't getting, the other women he was dating. Now, later, as I think she's trying to utilize the freak off sessions as a bargaining chip to get the things that she wants, later she says, well, you should stop forcing women to do this. And maybe she was being honest about that. Maybe she, at some point just didn't want to do it. She does tell him that at one point she didn't want to do it. I'm not excusing his behavior, but I'm describing why the jury possibly didn't see it the way we thought it should go. But she's only bringing this up when she's trying to ask for more money. I wish that you would not treat women like this. Make women sleep with strangers. This creates demons inside them. And then I think in this same conversation, he says to her, well, what would it take to make you comfortable? And she literally says, well, my livelihood, meaning her house, because she says that I'm tired of feeling like my home is being threatened each time I don't do what you tell me or what you want me to do. So that's material. And then she says, after he says, well, what would it take to make you comfortable? Because she says, you're going to need to make me comfortable. And this is when he knows the feds is on him. She says, Well, I need to know that I'm going to have a roof over my head and $100,000. And he literally in the transcript, I think it was a text message, he told her F you in the text message. He said F you. And I'm just, it's not funny, but it is, because it's like, is she serious? Like throughout the trial, I was literally, through her testimony, I was like, what is she doing? And she was very unpredictable during the trial. She was up one day, down the next day. She was getting an attitude with Tenny Garagos one day, which is Sean Combs' attorney. Then the next day, she was, barely answering the government's questions. And then, y'all, she might have a mental problem. I'm serious. Then when she's done with the testimony, she goes and she hugs Sean Combs' attorneys, the defense attorneys. And I'm saying, what is she doing? Like, what are you doing? Like, even if, you feel like you want to hug somebody or whatever, that's fine. But hugging the defense attorneys or even the government after you've been on the stand for like 4 days or 3 days or however long she was on, that's just weirdo vibes to me. I'm like, what is she doing? What does she think she's doing? And then it's noted that she gives Combs the longest, most evilest stare. He's shooting glances back at her. It's crazy. And then later I heard that she also hugged somebody on the government side. So I'm saying all this to say that Daphne Joy was a terrible witness. And I think she blew the trafficking case. They could have gotten the RICO, the trafficking under the RICO, but because the jury apparently felt the RICO was so weak, then that was never going to happen. The separate trafficking counts were, they indicted him on the separate trafficking counts so that they could make sure, have an insurance policy that they would get him on the trafficking counts in case the RICO didn't go through. But it turns out none of it went through, because I personally think it's because of Daphne, because I think like any doubt that they had of Cassie, Daphne reinforced that. Yeah. Yeah, Daphne reinforced that. Now, yeah, exactly. Janine and Back in Black. Yeah. It, Daphne sort of like, reinforced that. She reinforced doubt within the jury as it related to Cassie, because the jury saw the SEX trafficking counts the same, right? And then like also I think she also just on her own just sort of torpedoed the credibility that she actually kind of had as it related to the pattern. So that's the other reason the government brought Daphne Joy in. They brought her in to corroborate the pattern, that because that's what you need for racketeering. So they had already established that this is what he did with Cassie from 2018 to 2019 or whatever the case is, right? But then they brought in Daphne Joy to say that from 2020 to 2024, he was still doing the same thing. In the jury instructions, it was very specific that you must, in order to find guilty for RICO, you must be able to prove, or the government must be able to prove, that in 2019 to 2024, he was doing the same thing, that there was a pattern in behavior. So they bought Daphne in for that. Now, that's the part she actually helped with. But because her testimony was so erratic and it was so just all over the place and non like sequential in nature, they couldn't believe her. She was not credible. She was not credible. I believed her as it related to the pattern, because some of the same things that she talks about as it relates to Combs and how he, would treat her and everything was some of the same things that went on with Cassie, though there were differences. And I think that there were differences because Daphne was much older. I think that Daphne was an escort, and that was an established role that she had. I think also, obviously, her being 50 Cent's baby's mother also played a role in the way that Combs sort of didn't treat her as rough, if you will, as he did Cassie, you know. So to me, those were the differences, but there were some very clear cut patterns as it related to the freak offs, the way he would order the freak offs, how he would have the girls, do certain things, order the escorts, how he would have the girls dress, the drugs, all those things, that was the pattern that the government was trying to illustrate from Daphne's crazy testimony. it was just it was just wild to me. Let's see, what else did he say? Yeah, he says, this is the alternate juror. He says, I think, he said they asked him if they believed Cassie, and he says, well, I don't think it was forced. And he says they seem to be willing participants because of the text messages that the defense showed from Cassie. And he said it didn't seem like forced text messaging, but he said that I think we did believe her. And he added that she was very credible, is what he said. And he said that she wouldn't have done all this just to come up there and lie about everything. And let's see, what else did he say? And then, of course, the freak off videos, he just said that it just didn't seem forced to him and that it was pretty tame. Now, sir, it might be pretty tame to you because maybe you watch pornography all the time, but that doesn't mean that, like, this footage was tame to everybody else. You know what I'm saying? When he said that, when I heard him say that the first time, I was like, okay, well, maybe it was tame to you because maybe that's what you do, and that's cool. But, like, for those of us who don't watch other people in that activity, that none of that is tame. You know what I mean? And also, they had said during the freak off videos, when they were shown to the jury in the jury box, but no one else in the courtroom could see them, they said that people were laughing. People were laughing. The first thing I thought of, and y'all don't kill me, but I just thought it was interesting because they were laughing. The first thing I thought of, because they said that Cassie had on a wig, was Uncle Elroy from next Friday. Remember Uncle Elroy, him and Kim Whitley's character? They had like this whole dungeon thing, and she had on that wig, and that's what it made me think. I was like, that's probably what they were laughing at. We're probably thinking of something like that. I was like, oh my gosh. But anyway, he says, he goes on to say that despite not seeing Combs as guilty of the aggressive criminal charges of racketeering and sex trafficking, he said he is not eager to have any communications with Sean Combs. He says, to be honest, I really wouldn't want to talk to Combs or anyone associated with that. And that's what the alternate juror had to say. So, what do y'all think? Janine and Kim, I know how y'all feel, but what do you think about this juror? His points about what he made about Daphne Joy, about he's an alternate, so he didn't really get to vote on anything or deliberate, should I say. But what do you guys think? Any of you guys think about like what he's saying? Is it credible? Is what he's saying, is it a cop out to sort of make excuses? And hey, like some people are saying that the jury was paid off. Do people really think that the jury was paid off? I don't think that the jury was paid off. I think this is just how they, deliberated. They just felt like there wasn't enough there, and it happens, There are also a lot of conspiracy theories going on now about the Comey of it all, Miss Comey. She's an attorney. She's one of the attorneys, and about how she was involved in the Jeffrey Epstein trial, and how that trial went nowhere because, of course, Jeffrey Epstein. Um, yeah. Okay. Kim is saying, I agree that and no KK. Yeah. And listen, a lot of people feel the way you do, that they needed KK. Um, and the only explanation I could give that seems at all plausible to me about not having KK is the fact that she was going to be indicted after Combs's hopeful conviction, which they didn't get. And so now they just leave her alone because there's no way they can indict her by herself. Combs was the big fish. So I think their plan was to indict him, convict him, and then indict her. Um, so I mean, I guess they could have tried him at the same time, but I think they needed him to be convicted in order to make the case stick on KK and any other co-conspirator. And so therefore she wouldn't have been available to be a witness at all unless they were willing to offer her immunity, which apparently they were not, and they wanted to indict her. That's what I'm thinking. Janine, you're saying, no, I don't believe they were paid off. They were paid. I went off the page for a minute. What are you saying? Oh, it's all good. Yeah, I just, I don't think they were paid off either. I just think that this is the way the jury ruled, or the way they deliberated. There were some weak spots as it relates to, the way that the defense, came in with the case. I mean, I'm sorry, the prosecution came in with the case. I think that they had some weak witnesses. I was very disappointed in Brendan Paul's, who was a drug mule. I was very disappointed in his testimony. He really didn't give up any real sort of testimony that would have helped the prosecution, other than what we saw on video with the feds apprehending him at the Miami airport on the tarmac. I mean, other than that, it was almost like he wasn't there. I mean, they asked him questions about, his pattern with Combs. He basically said that he still likes Combs, that he's a good guy, that he wanted a chance. Now what I was thinking was going on there really was that a lot of these people that got on the stand were really afraid of Sean Combs, and they know that he still has, or they feel he still has, influence in the music industry. And so Brendan Paul is still, chasing this music industry dream. So he didn't want to, I feel, he didn't want to sort of get himself blackballed or in trouble. And also there's a possibility that he was afraid of Combs himself, and didn't want to say anything that would be completely, aggressively, um, um, offensive. So when the defense asked him, so are you, how do you feel about Combs today? It's like, oh, well, I think he's great, versus the Sean Combs Enterprises, what's the name, guy, the CFO brother. When they asked him how did he feel about Combs today, he said, I don't know how to answer that, to be honest with you. And I think that was an honest answer, and that told you all you needed to know. He didn't need to come up and be like, oh, I don't like him, or I think he's a weirdo, this dude here, he didn't need to say any of that. Just him saying, I don't know how to answer that, was enough. Seriously. Would you say there, Kim? I think Brandon Paul and Kim said she think they did the rodeo. Listen, based on what we've been hearing, I would not doubt it at all. I mean, you just never know. You know what I'm saying? That is very funny. Oh my gosh. And also, like, have you guys seen, who is that? Oh, Torre. Torre talk about his, I think it's a cousin that he ended up getting an internship for with Sean Combs. And Torre, of course, is a very noted journalist, music journalist, Rolling Stone, Vibe, Atlantic, like all over the place. I love Torre. I love his writings. But he has his own YouTube channel. Not to move y'all away from my channel, but he's really cool and I like his channel. And he has a episode called Sociopath, and it's about Sean Combs. And he tells a lot of stories, at both real that happened between him and Sean Combs and anecdotal, and it's really fascinating. And one of the things he says is that he had gotten his cousin an internship with Combs at his cousin's request. He got the cousin an internship, and he says, you know, the cousin was flying all around with Combs and everything. And after about 4 months, the internship just ended, and he didn't know why. He was like, well, you know. And so he said the cousin, I think it's a cousin, but anyway, the cousin never said why. And he says, like, some years later, he caught up with the cousin, and they find, I think it's a male cousin. He finally told him why. And it was because Sean Combs had propositioned him and basically said, like, you know, if you need to come with me to my house and spend the night with me, or the internship is over. And the cousin said, bye, the internship is over. And that was it. And so knowing that a person like has the audacity to like say that to somebody, I don't care if you're the boss or not, like, that's wild to me. You know what I mean? That he would actually have like the audacity to say that to somebody. So back in black, Kim, I would not put it past Sean Combs that something happened between the both of them. I mean, I'm not saying that it did. I don't know. You know, I have no idea, but it wouldn't surprise me based on what I've heard. And Torre is a very credible source. Like, he is somebody who is respected in the world of not only hip hop, but music in general. And he is somebody who is respected in journalism. And I just believe him. I do. And you guys should check out the episode he has on Sean Combs on his YouTube channel. He also has a TikTok, and it's a very fascinating. Both accounts are really good and fascinating. He's had a lot to say about Sean Combs during the trial phase of all of this, because he's had a lot of run-ins with him, and they've not all been positive, but he's been fearless as it relates to him, because he even said one time that I guess he had a problem. Sean Combs had a problem with something he wrote, and that he was threatening to get him fired or something, or end his career. And he's like, I don't see how you could even possibly do that. You can't end my career. Like, what? You know? So, you know, my point is, I believe Torre, he's very credible. You know, yeah, no. Brendan is not the reason Combs got arrested. No. It's much deeper than that. Nobody really knows the exact origin story of why, you know, Sean Combs, or what flipped the switch to the whole Sean Combs arrest thing. Now there's a bunch of conspiracy theories flying around. But I think as it relates to just like, you know, what can be confirmed based upon the law, I think it's a culmination of things. I think the feds were looking at Sean Combs, or have been looking at Sean Combs for many years. I do. And I think that based upon that, they could have received information. Obviously, the most obvious thing that sort of sparked this whole thing was the lawsuit from Little Rod, written by Tyrone Blackburn, where he sort of, you know, alleges that he's got like all the things we heard about in the trial going on. And this is stemming from the fact that he didn't give him any production rights to this last album, the Love album or whatever, that he worked on the production, but he didn't give him production rights. He had, was basically assaulted in the studio, both sexually as well as physically. That Combs showed him a gun at some point, that Combs was doing drugs in the studio, that he was dealing with underage people, girls, whatever, in the studio. It was just like, the lawsuit is just a lot. It's just a lot. And then, of course, the other obvious sort of preemptive strike for this whole thing was the Cassie lawsuit. So, Combs basically, Cassie goes to him and says, hey, I'm getting ready to write a book. And, if you don't want to be mentioned in the book, let's come up with a settlement number. He basically tells her to go to where, and offers her like, I think it was like I think it was like 10 million, if I'm not mistaken. And it wasn't to her liking, and because she felt like she was owed more than that, especially after being, dealing with what she felt she dealt with. And so then she filed a public lawsuit, which is, I told you guys yesterday, and sort of described that to you as to that's the reason people file public lawsuits, so that, the believability of it all, so that they have the court of public opinion on their side, so that the person will settle. And the day after she launched the lawsuit, he settled with her for 20 million. So that's sort of probably the causes of his arrest directly, like just from stemming from this situation. But I think that the feds were on Combs for many years. Many years. They were like on him. Brendan Paul was probably in middle school when they were watching Combs. So yeah, he's just a kid that got caught up. He didn't know that he had the cocaine on him. He didn't know he had the 75 grams of cocaine on him, which isn't that much, but it's enough to arrest. Yeah, the liquor company, that's like a conspiratorial, thing. People think, the Diageo, I'm not saying it right probably, but that lawsuit probably has something to do with it, because Combs sort of like is coming at them like, oh, well, you're racist. You won't let me own Ciroc outright. You know, and so he's like, well, since you won't let me own it outright, then I am going to sue you. You guys are racist. And so some people feel like Diageo dropped the dime on him. Obviously, we've heard about the fact that Jamie Foxx said what he said, during his stand-up, and he's saying he was kidding. We don't know. So there's a lot of factors. I think I heard, like, during the course of the trial, that it was his daughter, Corinne, that actually dropped the dime to the feds on him. I don't know how true that is. So there's a lot of, there's a lot of conspiratorial things. So Queen Israel says that she's glad that Diddy beat the charges because she thinks that they charged him. Well, I have a different opinion. So I'm going to tell you my legal opinion about it. So the grand jury, and I kind of talked about this yesterday. Janine, you'll probably be like, oh, okay, yeah, she talked about this yesterday. But this is the reason why I don't think they overcharged him. So in order to convene a grand jury, well, actually, let me start a little up further than that. When you convene a grand jury, and the purposes for convening a grand jury is to check the government, to ensure that they are not charging frivolously, to ensure they are not just out here, we're going to get them on this, and the third. Convening a grand jury is a fact-finding mission. When you convene a grand jury, it basically finds if there was any criminal activity. A grand jury's purpose is to find that there was evidence, enough evidence to indict someone on a specific set of charges. That's what a grand jury does. So having that in mind, I don't think that they overcharged. And I'm going to tell you why, too. What they didn't charge him on, things like the gun charges. Now, I think they tried it with the grand jury, which is a secret jury that nobody knows this is happening. Nobody knows. You get to do a lot of things with a grand jury that you normally don't get to do when you're trying to put together an arrest affidavit, which is a normal way of investigating a crime and then arresting someone. So the grand jury allows you more room and evidentiary entitlement to investigate, subpoena people, talk to more people, all those sort of things, right? So the gun charges that they did not end up indicting him on, I believe, is because the grand jury said, nope, you don't have the evidence. You don't have enough. But the grand jury said they had enough for the RICO. That's what they said. I believe they did not indict him on drug charges, not the distribution. They had enough for that, but they didn't have enough to indict him on, like, say, the baby oil being infused with GHB, which a lot of people are saying that's what it was, because why do you have thousands of bottles of baby oil, but you don't, what's that for? That has to have some sort of drug in it. The grand jury, I believe, said you don't have enough. You don't have enough. You don't have enough to do it. So that's the reason they convened that grand jury, for that reason, to circumvent the government from overcharging him. Now, why does everybody have a problem with the RICO? Because they're not used to seeing it like this. They're used to it being mobsters. This is a mafia law. Well, it was created for the mafia so they could sweep them up in a dragnet. Yeah, that's true. But there are other ways. I have actually been involved in what they call at the state level COCA cases. So COCA and RICO are the same thing. COCA cases are the state versions of a RICO charge. And I've been involved in a COCA pimping case, which is very similar to this one. And they did get the guy. The reason they did not get Sean Combs is variable, right? Weak witnesses. He's a noted guy. People get starry-eyed, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But mostly, and I said this before the verdict came through, is that I believe the jury did not understand the RICO statute because of the way that the government sort of had it laid out and they had it layered in. A lot of people don't understand what you mean when you talk about the predicate acts. Well, what exactly does that mean? They can't sort of wrap their mind around it. I'm not saying that the jury isn't intelligent, that they are not a group of people that could have understood it. But for whatever reason it could have been just they were tired. They had been there 6.5, 7 weeks. They just really didn't take a lot of time to understand the RICO statute. And the reason I'm saying that is because they literally came back with a verdict in like 3 days. Now, actually, not even 3 days. They deliberated for 16 hours. 16 hours. That's what it was. So that's over the course of like 2 or so days. They had a 100-page jury instruction that they weren't even allowed to look at until they got back there. So I know for sure that first day that they went back to deliberate, they probably deliberated for maybe 4 hours, maybe. Then the next day they came back and they deliberated for the whole day. And then they said, oh, we have a verdict on 2 through 5, but we can't do nothing but with the 1. We don't, or whatever it was. So to me, I feel like the jury rushed through that. I really do. It was my professional opinion. I'm not an attorney, but again, I'm a public information officer who worked for the DA for many years, and I understand a lot of this. And many public information officers are lawyers because we have to talk like lawyers and write like lawyers and understand things like lawyers. And it was my professional opinion that the government had him on the RICO. But the only way that they would not convict him on it is because the jury did not understand. It's very difficult for people who do not work in the legal field to understand complex counts like that. You're talking about a RICO, which has three components to it: an enterprise. You need an agreed upon enterprise that you and 2, 3 other people are going to work in this enterprise for the enjoyment of the boss, which would have been Sean Combs. And number 3, you have to establish a pattern, which is a racketeering, right? Then underneath those 3 elements are the predicate acts. They had 8. They had the arson, whether it's shaky or not. I'm just naming the predicate acts. Sorry, guys. Somebody's trying to talk to me. I'm not trying to talk to them right now. So you had the predicate acts. They had the arson, the kidnapping, the sex trafficking, the prostitution, this thing that he ended up getting caught on, the distribution of narcotics. They had, I'm missing a couple. Actually, they had 6 because they took out the other ones that they had. But I'm missing one. I just can't think of it right now. But anyway, the bribery. That's what it was. They had 6. They had 6 predicate acts that the jury could pick from. They could pick 2 out of those 6 predicate acts in order to convict on the RICO based on the 3 components I already talked about, right? The predicate acts that they picked could have actually been the same predicate act actually done or committed twice. It didn't even have to be a different predicate act. So as I viewed it and looked at it and what they needed it to be, I felt like they had the RICO in week 4. It just depended on how the jury interpreted the evidence. And yes, Janine, well, the defense kind of helped the rush job. They were like, oh, let him go back, let him, and the prosecution was saying, well, if we have a juror that's saying that they can't follow directions, because this was juror number 25, and if they don't understand the distribution of narcotics, because that was their question, they said the question was, if I ask somebody for drugs and they give it to me, is that distribution of narcotics? The answer is yes. Well, the government wanted to say, the answer is yes. Please refer to the jury instructions. And I think they ended up saying that, but the defense was like, well, we just need to give them, I don't want to put them on a timetable because they think that they don't have enough time. And I think sort of like the defense was sort of trying to fast track them without seeming like they were. And so I think that it was just a culmination of things. I think this jury was tired. I think we were getting ready to head into a holiday. They did not want to come back to the courthouse after the 4th of July. I think they were just done with it. It would have helped if they were sequestered, but they don't generally do that. I'm told for federal cases, they do it for state cases. But they don't sequester for federal cases because I think it has something to do with the district size, so it costs more money. But this jury should have been sequestered because I can't even be sure that anyone didn't get to them. That's just, there's a lot of like people, speculating that could have happened. But I will say the jury process as it relates to the courts, they're very, very good at making sure that the jury is insulated, that nobody talks to them, that nobody, gets near them. But that doesn't mean that like people can't get a hold of the jury, because the lawyers know who the juries are. They've seen the jury cards, the defense attorneys. They've seen the jury cards. The jury cards has like where they live, what they do, all that kind of stuff on there. So is it plausible that somebody could have gotten to them? Possibly. But I really think that they just didn't understand. And with the RICO, the other thing that affected it, if they convicted on the RICO, they had to convict on count 2 or count 4, which are the trafficking charges, because the trafficking charges were predicates were predicate acts under the RICO. So let me say that again. In order to get, if they were going to convict him on the RICO, they would have also had to find him guilty on count 2 and or count 4, which are the trafficking charges, because the trafficking charges were predicate acts under the RICO. So I feel like when they came back and they said that they had, 2 through 5, and they just didn't know what to do with 1, I think that was because they were confused. And rather than saying that, like they couldn't come up with a unanimous decision, but rather than saying that, they just said, we just can't come up with a unanimous decision. And then the judge ended up telling them to go back. But I think they were confused. I think they didn't know. That's what I think. Because that was the outlier. Had they understood, he probably would have got R. Kelly'd. Because how is it that R. Kelly, now R. Kelly, the only difference between Sean Combs and R. Kelly is that R. Kelly had underage people or underage women that were accusing him of these crimes, but some of those had reached the statute of limitations. So some of those weren't even included in his case. But R. Kelly still was convicted of the RICO. That's the reason why I don't buy this whole thing where everybody's saying like, oh, there is no RICO there. Well, there's case law that's already been established. Precedent has already been set with the R. Kelly case. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, certain predicate acts didn't have there wasn't enough proof. They were weaker predicate acts, but that doesn't mean that just because they don't have a fingerprint on the arson doesn't mean that he wasn't guilty of the other predicate acts. That's the reason why there are 6 predicate acts that they were allowing the jury to consider, and that you only needed to find 2, that he was guilty of 2 of those 6. So really, they didn't really even need the arson. If the jury didn't believe the arson, okay, big woof. You have 5 other predicate acts that you can look at to see. He definitely bribed Officer Garcia and Flores at the Intercontinental. That was a predicate act. And the distribution of drugs, he definitely did that. Now, if they're hung up on the 3 components as it relates to you have to have an enterprise, well, he has an enterprise. They've got a big boss. His name is Sean Combs, and he has a bunch of people who work for him who do things at his behest, like lock people in closets or lock people in the hotel room when he says so, like pay the escorts when he says so. Also, another predicate act was the prostitution. Thank you, Matthew. I appreciate you. Another predicate act was the prostitution. Okay, so like they had it, but my point is the security, and between the security, the assistants, and his chief of staff, KK, he had an enterprise. I don't see how people don't see it, because he had an enterprise. He had people working for him, his underlings doing his work. KK moved on his word and even went before him to do other things. You got little Brendan Paul running around here with drugs every 5 seconds, bringing him the 2C, doing this, doing that. You got KK making sure he's got all the little baby oil, whatever he needs. But on the illegal side, then you've got these people calling the escorts, setting up the little King Knight's room, and all of that. Calling the escorts is illegal because you're not allowed to call prostitutes. And then the third component of that is the racketeering. The racketeering is just a pattern. That's all it means. That's all it means, is that there's a pattern of behavior. And he did this for like years and years and years, past 2019, which was a requirement in the jury instructions. But again, they couldn't get past Jane Doe, and I just think she kind of just messed it up. Because see, what happens with a lot of juries is that they be like, look, you got a non-credible witness up there, and we just don't believe her. So that just turns me off on the whole case. You know what I mean? So I just think it's like, Yeah, exactly, Matthew. Yeah, like the holiday kind of like changed things for people. Like they're like, I'm not staying here past the 4th of July. I'm going to the Hamptons. I'm going to Virginia Beach. I'm going. Like you're trying to mess up my plans. Like juries do think that way. It sounds kind of like frivolous or whatever, but they do think that way. And I just think people just weren't feeling it. They were not. I think they were tired. They were done with it. On that note, the prosecution actually cut their case short. And I don't know if that's because they felt like they had them and they could just roll off with it, and go on about their business. They felt like, they had presented enough to the jury and that the jury had enough to consider. But they did not call as many people as they were supposed to. Now, I think what would have helped is the character witnesses, like more character witnesses. Like, yeah, we have Mia and Miss Bogalong or whatever, but then were they believable? These are people who work for him, and that's okay. But these are also people who came up there and said, you know, um, well, I loved him and he was great. And while he was this, he was still that. And, it was just hard to kind of believe him because the Mia girl said that he full on RAPED'd her twice. And then she says in part of her testimony that she still like loved him, was sending text messages. They showed the text messages, how she was, oh, I love you, and da 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 da, and this and the third. And it's like, I don't love any sucker that has RAPED'd me. And that's kind of the defense. And I agree with the defense. That's what the defense says. He's like, how are you saying you love somebody if he supposedly RAPED'd you? What, like, that makes no sense. So the defense whole thing was that she was lying about it and that the sexual activity between her and Combs was consensual, that she was jealous of Cassie, who was her friend, and that she was trying to make a move for him for herself, but it didn't really work out for her the way that she wanted. So now she's here testifying because she's bitter. That's what the defense said. And I'm not mad at them for that. Like, that's kind of like, it's plausible. It's plausible, you know? I just think they could have had more like character witnesses. Um, I think because at one point I thought Albie Sure was going to testify because there were a lot of people, they said, oh, so and so was going to testify. But I think it would have been good to have somebody who did know about the relationship between him and Kim Porter. Not because we wanted to include her in this trial as much as it is to show that he had a pattern of bad behavior or a pattern of trying to force his ladies into things that they didn't want to do, right? And so I'll be sure testifying would have been a great character witness. And I actually read him say before the trial that he was ready, to testify, because he knew him and he knew what kind of person he was. And I think that's where they missed the mark. It's sort of like showing a pattern of this sort of forcible behavior as it related to people outside of his orbit, his employee orbit. Also, ex-employees, like what happened to what's the one security guy, everybody that keeps talking? It's not Gene Deal, even though I expected to hear from him. But oh, I can't remember the name of the guy. He's the light-skinned guy with bald head. He's mentioned in testimony too. I can't remember, but it would have been good to have one of his, yeah, Bond. That's it, Matthew, him. Yeah. It would have been good to have him because he talked about, I don't know if it was with he was interviewed by the government, and so was Gene Deal. He was also interviewed by the government, but they just didn't use them, but they should have, because I think like it hurt the government to have all the women. They needed a male perspective to really set the tone. And I'm not talking about the escorts. I'm just talking about a male perspective who was like part of an employee, being an employee, but like could really give an impartial, so to speak, impartial opinion about how he treated Cassie or Daphne Joy. Like, yeah, he forced them. It's a little different, especially when you have Roger Bonds, especially when you have people who are like not really believing the victims because they don't believe that like they were RIPED'd, or they don't believe that the victims were like, you know, in any way, shape, or form like there for like real reasons, that they were there for money or whatever. So it would have been good to hear from like Roger Bonds and, you know, somebody else who was like a male witness, any security guy that said, yeah, this was forced, and not Brendan Paul. See, Brendan Paul was not a good witness for them because it was stated that they hid a lot of the activity from him. Like, yeah, he would go and set up the bathroom for Daphne Joy, like, you know, for the ahead of the freak off or whatever, but they hid a lot of the like freak off activity from them. So yeah, that is what the defense attorney said, Janine. But I think he was incredibly arrogant and incredibly heartless to say that on the stand. I wanted to punch him when he said that Cassie screamed rape because she couldn't, because her husband found out that she was having sex with Sean Combs when they met for the last time after they broke up or whatever the case is. But one of the things with abuse victims, when they leave a person and break up, you're talking about a guy who actually extorted her parents because for $20,000 because she was dating somebody else, Kid Cudi. Whether you want to believe the arson, if you don't want to believe the arson, that's fine. But then you believe Regina Ventura when she got on the stand and said that Sean Combs extorted her and her husband out of $20,000 because Cassie was dating somebody else. So then if you follow that up with Cassie like finally leaving him and actually having a boyfriend, and that boyfriend being Diddy's ex trainer, I don't think it's far-fetched that Diddy would force himself on her. Sorry. I think that's totally believable. And I think it was despicable for Agnifilio, Combs's closing attorney, to do that. It was ugly. It was ugly. He basically said Mia wasn't RAPED. She lied. Cassie was not RAPED. She lied. You know, that sort of thing, which is his job to poke holes, but it was the way that he did it, and it was just very disgusting, degrading, and disrespectful. I mean, he got what he wanted because they didn't convict on those charges. And I think I mentioned to you guys in other lives and other episodes that I've done that I've done these cases before where, like, you know, it's an athlete and you have like a woman who is accusing the athlete of RAPED. And the case that I was doing with the Denver Bronco player, we had physical evidence, like physical evidence, and still couldn't convince a jury because juries, they just don't believe women when they holler, like you just said, scream, or when they holler rape, they don't believe women. And I really believe in the case that I was dealing with, had there been more than one, we probably would have got a conviction because we had the physical evidence. But because we didn't have more than one, then we didn't convict. And this particular case with Combs, had you had physical evidence, it would have been a whole different ballgame. But because they didn't, and there was no tape showing that she was forced, and they had already seen the freak off tapes and she didn't look forced. But that doesn't mean that he didn't RAPED her on another day, you know. But it's just consent. Her word against his. And this is why victims don't come forward. This is why. Because they don't think they're going to be believed. And I got to tell you, I've never been in this situation, but I've dealt with it enough in our special victims unit that we had, special crimes unit that we had. And I've dealt with it enough to be traumatized myself by it. And I can tell you, until it's you, and until it's somebody in your family, and until it's somebody you know, then it doesn't get to you. You don't get, because you don't have to be there for the ugliness of it all. You don't have to be there for any of that. And the reason I knew it happened in the case that I'm talking about is because we had to go to the Denver Broncos training camp to make these guys. It was like 3 guys that we had to get DNA from to compare it against the physical evidence we had. We had to go. We had subpoenaed them. They wouldn't show up. They wouldn't show up to give their DNA. So we went to the Denver Broncos training camp. We went to camp, and we went there. It was during like the summer training camp, and we went with a swab to get it. And we went and got their DNA, and they had no choice. We had already talked to the front office and told them we were coming. We're on our way. Coincidentally, our offices were down the street from the training camp, so that was interesting. But we were like, we're on our way. Please have them ready. Do not have them on the field. They need to be in the office. We have a search warrant for their DNA. And the Denver Broncos were like, please, because they would not submit. And then when we did the DNA, it matched. We had a match. So we had them. It's just a matter of what the jury is going to believe. The girl could report right away, like this girl I'm talking about did. She could have physical evidence like we did in her case. And she could have all sorts of things. You can have text messaging. You can have video. You can have a phone call. You can have a pigeon. You can have everything. But if that jury does not want to convict, for whatever the reasons are, because it's P. Diddy, because it's a Denver Bronco player, because it's a Denver Nugget player, because it's this or that or the third, then they won't. They won't. People don't like to see their heroes get convicted of crimes, even if they're guilty. But let it be Joe Schmo. Had it not been a Bronco player, had it not been Sean Combs, you would have saw a conviction. I really do think so. And it's unfortunate. These SEX crime cases are hard. They're really, really, really tough. They're tough. You know? Now later, this same girl I'm talking about, she successfully sued 3 of those players civilly in civil court. Walked away with 3 bags. Because the burden of proof as it relates to civil is 50 to 51%. I told you guys about that yesterday. So she didn't even need a guilty on the criminal case, although it would have helped her case. But she didn't even need a guilty on the criminal case to get them civilly. Why? Because in civil court, they said, well, we have physical evidence. Oh, yeah, he did it. Oh, yeah, they're liable. Oh, yeah, But in criminal, if there's even an inch of doubt, they get to say that, you know. And this guy, I'm telling you, this player that I'm talking about, you could tell that he's a ladies' man. He was in the courtroom trying to flirt, not only with me, but also his cousin and some of the other players, because there was like other players in the courtroom, you know, like especially during the trial phases, people were like, you know, on the stand. And it was like, do y'all understand that this is a SEX case, like a SEX like crime case, that somebody's got assaulted here? This is not the club. This is not, you know, any of that. And so I'm saying that because people basically do what is natural to them. And when you have people like Combs, and when you have people who are, you know, like human gods, you know, these ball players, they think they're above, that they can do that. There's so many people that worship them, that want to be them, that want to be in their orbit. So they can go and do things and get away with it. Because why? Because nobody wants to convict. And on the jury that I'm talking about, there was not one black person on that jury. This is the reason why I'm telling you guys too, that this is very little to do with Sean Combs being hemmed up because he's black. There was not one black person on that jury in the case that I'm talking about the Denver Bronco. And they still would not convict him because he's a Denver Bronco. And this is Denver. That's not going to happen. And this is how it is for Sean Combs. Sean Combs is the king of New York. I'm not going to convict him. Harlem World. Are you kidding? So I think it's more than just like, you know, a lot of the things that people are mentioning. The video had nothing to do with the 2 lesser crimes that he was convicted of. That was the easiest. The crime that he was convicted of under the Mann Act, the lessers, were the easiest things to convict him of. The juror actually said that. I don't think there's anybody, especially in the legal world, that would look at this case and say he was not guilty of the Mann Act, because he was obviously flying in prostitutes from here, there, and the third. You know what I'm saying? So that was easy. They didn't need the video for that. You know, Janine is saying, but after watching the trial, I started looking at facts because the trial was not about. Yeah, but you're kind of missing the point too, Janine. No disrespect to you, but you're kind of missing the point too, because, like, first of all, they would never have tried a DB case on a Fed case. That's a state case, and it's a misdemeanor state case. So the feds would have never charged domestic violence. It's not anything that it's not anything that they would bring. That's not a federal charge, a DV charge. That's a state charge. So that never was going to be. I explained to you guys on what the tape on that tape where it becomes SCX trafficking. It becomes trafficking when he drags her back to that room. It's not trafficking until he does that. When he does that, it's trafficking under the law, under the statute. Why? Because she already left on her own recognizance. She said she don't want to be there. There is a prostitute, a male prostitute, in that other room. She's saying no, flatly, because she's gone. She's taking her things. She's gone. She's going about her business. Then he comes running down the hall after her, and then he grabs her and then drags her. Once he grabs her and then drags her, that's sex trafficking. All day long. All day long. So the jury did not understand, perhaps, the jury instructions. That's why I said the jury instructions were 100 pages long. Did they read them? Don't know. Because had they read them, they would have interpreted the video a lot differently. Now, the jury question came up that they wanted to see the testimony from Cassie's testimony from as it related to the video. Then the defense had a victory because because they were allowed to bring in Cassie's Instagram post when the video became public, and she says domestic violence is never the answer, and so the defense wanted that to accompany the testimony that the jury was asking for. So of course the prosecution fought them on that, but they didn't win it. The judge was like, well, you know, I'm sure they've already seen it. It's not going to change the price of tea in China. Essentially, is what he said. But I think it had a lot to do with it, because this is a jury who was not really interested in reading the jury instructions, I feel, and they just we're going to take what's in front of them. So they interpreted that Instagram post as being, well, it must be DV because that's what she said, and that's how she interpreted it. But yeah, but Cassie's not a lawyer. She doesn't. Sometimes people don't even know that what has happened to them is actually illegal. So she doesn't know. You need to look at the jury instructions. What does a jury instruction say about that video? And lawyers will tell you that the moment he drags her back into that hallway, it's trafficking. Trafficking isn't just, some girl getting snatched off the streets or some guy getting snatched off the streets and being sold to the highest bidder. Trafficking isn't just a pimp having a bunch of, prostitutes who don't want to be there. That's not trafficking. It is trafficking, but that's not the only version of trafficking. There's all kind of versions, and this is one of them. So I don't know. I think the sentencing is gonna be interesting. But yeah, I don't think the Denver Broncos had anything to do with our non-convict. They're a very conservative organization. A lot of Republicans. So no, I don't think so. As a matter of fact, they were almost ready to put him on waivers when we came up with the charges. When we came up with it, they were, and as a matter of fact, when he was acquitted, he still got released. The football teams don't like that, and he wasn't a big enough star. He was a cornerback, and he wasn't a big playmaker, but he was still on the team, and people knew who he was. So, no, I don't think so. I just think that it was that jury. Like, you say anything in Colorado, same thing with Texas. You put a Dallas Cowboy on a stand, or not the stand, but you have a Dallas Cowboy accused of something like that, nobody's, and it's only one girl, physical evidence or not, it's just sad, because I really believe like there are victims out there who are this close to reporting. I've had to spend time with victims in our victim witness rooms, as it relates to these cases, and it was just very clear that they weren't lying. Prostitutes can get RIPED'd. You don't have to be a saint to be RIPED'd. And I think that's what this jury was looking for. They were looking for an angel, or looking for some sort of, saint that is like, oh yeah, it's just like, no. And it's sad, it's devastating. I mean, when we went back into the room with our victim, she was devastated. She was devastated. I don't think she's modeled ever since. She was like a model. This was sort of like the beginning of like the beauty, the beginning of the Instagram model to sort of phase sort of thing. But she was a very beautiful Black woman. Very. But I've not seen her since. I think she just went away. Because when you are violated in that way, and she was, the accusation was that she was unconscious. She was dating somebody else on the team. She was unconscious at the time, and she was smart enough to go get a RAPE kit done, and that's how we had our physical evidence. But I was like so sad for her. I was really upset for her. And especially because like he went on with his life. Like he went on and he, had kids and all of that. I'm sure she's gone on to do whatever it is that she's going to do. But it's just like when you're a victim of something like that, it robs you of your trust for people just in general, because you can never sort of like trust anyone. So then you think about someone like Cassie, who, was just trying to make it in the industry, who could have been really big. And then he just robbed her of it. He never intended for her to be a star at all, which is why he trapped her in a 10-album deal that went nowhere, wouldn't let her really work. The only things that she was allowed to do, and that was part of the case too, was that he wasn't giving her the opportunity to like put herself out there. She couldn't do movie roles without his permission. She couldn't do these things. She couldn't become who she would have become because he was controlling her. And then when she tried to leave, he extorted her parents. And then when she tried to leave, depending on if you feel like it's enough evidence, he, threatened a potential boyfriend and all of that. Kid Cudi. And then when she tried to leave, he, assaulted her friends. Some people's like, oh, well, she could have just left. Well, she tried to. She absolutely did. And then he was like threatened her family, and then he extorted them and all these things. What are you supposed to do until this person lets me go? And that's why I believe he RAPED'd her, because it was like, I'm going to let you go, but before I let you go, I'm going to tear your world up. And I really think that's what happened. So it's sad. It's sad. It's a really sad thing. It's a sad day for crime victims. I think that there are a lot of people who want to come forward, but I don't think that they will. I think it's kind of, make them stay further, in the closet on things. It's just, it's unfortunate, and especially because the entertainment industry in general is shrouded in secrecy in terms of like what goes on. Lots of people don't say things when they should, simply because they want to keep their status. I've been a TV and film publicist for like 15 years, and I actually ended up, like, now I'm switching and turning back to public affairs, legal, my work doing that kind of stuff, because not only is the entertainment industry just not doing well financially right now, but also because I'm sick of pretending. Like, pretending that everything is okay, pretending not to see certain things. Not that I've seen anything illegal. I would say mostly it's just like people just being just terrible people, if that makes sense. And I'm just like, and I don't play the game. Like, I don't do, yeah, casting couch, exactly. But I don't play the game. Like, I don't do the whole, thing, I like do my job, I do it well, and then I keep it moving. But for a lot of people in industry, particularly people who are high up, super high up, they require you to play the game. And if you don't play the game, you're not going to make it high up. Like, I was a VP at an entertainment PR agency, and after the strikes, like, I lost my job at the firm during the strikes because the firm wasn't doing well because of all of the like strikes that we had, the actor strikes and all of that. So nobody was doing well. Much like now, like, they have a layoff every day at the Paramount, the Warner Brothers, they're all laying people off. But anyway, so after I got laid off, I went to, like, look for work. Obviously, I did a bunch of interviews, but I'm known in industry for being very no nonsense. I do my job. I don't lay around. I handle my business, and I represent the people who look like me very well in terms of respect. I give respect. You give respect. That sort of thing. I have a good reputation, but I don't play the game. And in order to work in some of these people you see that are at these studios and they're high up there, they're playing the game. They're playing the game. So I think, yeah, and that's exactly what they do. They do it to advance their career. They do it to get there faster, but there's no guarantee that you're going to get there any quicker, because the entertainment industry is super racist. So you could be black and think you're going to play the game all you want to, and you still won't get anywhere, because it only sort of, especially for me, like being behind the scenes, especially in the way that I am, like, they only want certain people. You know what I mean? There's a lot of gatekeepers, and, when I was given the opportunity to be a quote unquote gatekeeper, I helped a lot of people, and I did not and do not require anyone to do anything for me or anything like that. Like, if you know your job, let's come on the bus, But the problem with that is that there aren't a lot of people like that. Like, there's most of the people in the industry is like, you know, what have you done for me lately? Or what is in it for me? You know, that sort of thing. So unfortunately, that's just how it is. So I find myself, I'm shifting, going back into public affairs and still doing PR, but just a different type of it that I used to do, because I just, you know, I'm good. I'm good on the entertainment industry. It's an interesting experience, but it's just like probably not for me. Janine, let's see what you're saying now. You said she, and I assume you're talking about Cassie. Cassie, so she never went to police. Um, Plus, she benefited from lifestyle she was living, which I do believe she was living a good life as far as shopping, rent. Yeah, but he controlled everything. Janine, did you watch the trial, girl? Okay, because I'm thinking you may have missed a few days. So the thing with Cassie's testimony is that yes, she did benefit in the way that you're saying. But if she didn't do what he wanted her to do, he would take her car away. He would take her apartment away. He would take money away. So she had it, but she didn't. Also, who is she? What police is she going to call? When all he's going to do is get his security team to come in and cover for him. You're talking about a guy who beat a rap for shooting somebody in the face in the city of New York many moons before she came along. Like, okay, well then you watched it, but you're not remembering. So because you have to remember then, and I'm respectfully saying this to you. She did try to end the relationship. Elite, you coming in late, Elite. But she did try to end the relationship. And then when Elite, you coming in late, Elite. But she did try to end the relationship. And then when she tried to end the relationship, he extorted her family out of $20,000. Then when she tried to end the relationship, he went and basically tried to harm Kid Cudi. Now, I don't know if the arson, everybody said that's up in the air, and that's fine. But there were words and there was an issue with her dating Kid Cudi. He did not want her dating other people when she tried to leave. She tried to leave before. And that's what he did. And every time she tried to leave, then he would say, well, he would make a threat against her family. So if y'all remember in the trial, she was very specific about how he would give her things but take things away if she didn't obey him, if she didn't do what he wanted her to do, whether it was the freak off or whether it was whatever. And he would just arbitrarily beat her up just because he could. Not only did she say that, but that was also corroborated by other people who testified and said that they witnessed that. So I understand where y'all are coming from, but this is like not that I don't really understand. So then if you know about the girl that got shot in the face, then you understand that Diddy has had the police in his pocket for a long, long time. We definitely have agency and autonomy of ourselves. Absolutely. And I think she did what she could have. She tried to leave. She tried to leave and gone about her business where she didn't want to be with him anymore. Even when she was on that plane, leaving Cannes and going into New York, when she told him she did not want to freak off with him anymore, that she was done with that, he showed her the video of a freak off video that they did and said, okay, well, I'm going to show this to everybody. And so then he extorted her sexually so that she would do what he wanted her to do. Because if you don't, this freak off tape is going to everybody. And then he ended up actually sending the freak off tape to her parents, which is how he ended up talking to them about the $20,000, which is exactly what he extorted her for, that is. So anyway, I mean, that's your opinion, Elite, and God bless you, and that's fine. But I've already told you what the answers are. Now you can argue that. I'm not going to argue that because those are facts. Like what I'm telling you is facts that came out during the trial. However you want to interpret that is on you. No problem here. You know, that's why we having the discussion. But what I also think is that there are a lot of people making excuses for Sean Combs. There are a lot of people making excuses for bad behavior and trying to actually blame victims for things that someone else did. And they call that rape culture. And when you contribute to rape culture by actually blaming victims for something that someone else did, then you're contributing to it. And I hope those of you who are out there who are saying, well, it's her, and she should have did this X, Y, and Z. I hope you don't have daughters and expect for them to actually to actually uh to actually do the same thing, because people get groomed. That's real, whether it's a woman or a man, women and men. I've witnessed cases where men have been groomed and raped. It happens. And the fact of the matter is that there's always something that someone who, if they want to find a fault, can say that that victim should have done. Well, they should have did this. Oh, well, they should have did that. The bar gets higher and higher and higher because nobody wants to place the blame on the actual person who the blame should be on, which is the actor, the person who is actually manipulating people, who's actually grooming people, who's actually coercing people, who's actually extorting people. P. Diddy don't need $20,000. That's a coin to him. But he did that, extorted her parents, because he knew that $20,000 was not a coin to them. And what he was trying to tell them was, I can control you through your daughter. And guess what? I'm going to control her too, because she had gone back home. She wanted out. She wanted out. She wanted out. So you guys move the bar every time to fit whatever narrative you want. So, it just fits in that. And I get it. You have sons. I'm an only girl in a pretty much all male family, but if I still understand that women are pretty powerless in society, but also men too. And I think this case is showing you that men can also be put in these positions. They can also be put in these positions where they're being groomed, where they're also being RAPED'd. But I find that there's a little bit more sympathy for men than women, which is interesting. But I don't care. All crime victims deserve the sympathy. There's no such thing as a perfect victim. So if that's what y'all are looking for, you're never going to find that, because there's always something a victim maybe you think should have done. And when you guys do that, because I hear that in my own family, where it's like, well, I'm not saying that, she shouldn't have did this, but maybe if she did that, okay, you are invalidating what happened to her. You're being dismissive to the crime that actually happened to her, or to any of the crime victims for that matter. And when you do that, you are contributing to rape culture, blaming the victim, making excuses for the perpetrator, saying it wasn't that bad, saying, oh, well, she asked for it, that sort of thing. That's rape culture. And as a woman, I will never be a part of rape culture, ever, 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 ever. Because even though men can also be victims, women are highly in high danger just walking down the street. I live in Los Angeles County, and I'm from here, But when I go out here, I am extremely careful about the things I do, what I'm saying, who I'm looking at, how I'm looking at it. And I shouldn't have to do that, but I do, because we live in a society that says, well, if you're dressed a certain way, looking a certain way, talking a certain way, then, you can be, you can be a victim. Sure. You can, somebody can do something to you. That gives someone an excuse to do something to you, because you're putting yourself in a certain situation, And women are often victimized by, like, do you know that a man or a woman, whatever, but someone passing you by and grabbing you in the private part, or grabbing your butt, that's sexual assault. And when I was coming up, like as like a teenager, that was like a normal thing, but it's sexual assault. And so when you grow up in that and nobody tells you that's wrong, then you see stuff like this or other things and you're like, oh, well, that's not wrong. That's, and you don't even know that what you went through was actually a crime because of how people have been socialized. And I hear a lot of people say, like, oh, women or people are just being too sensitive now. No, it's just people are starting to call people out on their SHIT now. That's what it is. Like, you don't get a chance to get away with it. This isn't the 50s. You don't get to slap your secretary on the butt and keep it moving. That's sexual assault. Can't do it. You don't get to walk up to women and grab their boobs. You don't get to do that. So that's, that's SA. You don't get to do that. It's crazy. All right, y'all, we hitting the 2-hour mark. Thank y'all so much for joining me. I appreciate y'all. I appreciate the great conversation and the great debate that we had. I always try to be respectful to everybody. If I wasn't, please let me know and I will curtail going forward. But I think we can agree to disagree on some things because we're just all not going to agree on things, that's just how it is. But I do appreciate everybody. I respect everybody's opinions. It is what it is. The verdict is what it is. The jury said what they said. It is what it is. Now we're all just going to have to wait and see what the sentencing is going to be. And I just want to say another thing. No one is ever going to change anybody's mind. No matter how many things they say, no matter how many arguments they give, or no matter how many arguments I give, no matter how anything that I give either, you know what I mean? Nobody's going to change anybody's mind. And also one thing you have to remember is that we all come from different walks of life that shape our attitudes, that shape who we are. So your experiences shape who you are, and my experiences shape who I am, and my opinions and things that I say. So, and things that you feel and your opinions as well. But I want everybody to be safe out there, stay out of trouble, stay out of trouble. That's my soapbox. I always tell all my friends, stay out of trouble. Don't get caught up in the law. Don't get caught up on nothing. Just stay out of trouble. Like I told y'all on the last live, the way to stay off of the government's radar is to never be on their radar at all. Do not allow the government to get you under their radar. Don't do it. Just don't. It's so easy for people to commit crimes. Yes, Matthew. Don't. Don't. It's so easy for people to commit crimes and so easy for you to like get in the way, just don't. Stay out of their way because they be looking, they be trying to find things, especially as Black folks. We got to really encourage one another and really just try to do what we can to stay on this side. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, guys, appreciate y'all, love y'all, and thank you so much, and we'll talk soon. Have a good Sunday, guys. Good night.